Welcome to Kim Talks Resilience, where we share stories of insight and inspiration in life, love, and business with resilient women from around the world. Speaking with authors, entrepreneurs, founders, and coaches to learn their strategies for a more resilient life so we can all build the life we love. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. Hello, and welcome back to Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden, and if this is your first time joining us, let me bring you up to speed. Kim Talks Resilience is all about exactly that, talking resilience with incredible women from around the world, leaders, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs, authors, small business owners, these women who are stepping out in the space and saying, hey, I'm here. I'm ready to serve. I'm ready to lead. Asking these women their stories of what they do, who they are, and how they push through, because we know that success leaves clues. Today's guest is actually very timely and actually, unfortunately, timely all year round. Nancy, and I want to make sure I say this correctly, Perpall, I think. She's shaking her head. All right, let's start that over. Nancy Perpall is a family lawyer with 30 years of experience representing clients in divorce. After seeing many of her clients go through heart-wrenching divorce, she hopes to educate the greater public about issues that divorcing couples face. It's her life mission to help young people when they get engaged and understand the hard questions they need to ask to avoid many of the problems they'll inevitably face in the first year of marriage. So, setting the foundation. This is going to be a really, really good conversation. I'm super excited you're here, Nancy. Um, you know, First, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
This is a topic. This is a fundamental topic that we do need to talk more about, because in our society today, quick fixes and everything's my way, and I'm setting my boundaries, and be your best person, and ask your worth, and all this other stuff. Where does that leave space for partnership?
Well, unfortunately, it causes the partnership to fracture. And, it goes from people who were very much in love with each other to people who hate each other and can't be in the same room. So, we talked a little bit before we started streaming about retirement, and I'm retired now. And I spent over 30 years taking marriages apart. And in my retirement, I'm trying to educate people to keep marriages together. So that's what I'm doing in my retirement.
You gotta love a woman who sees an issue and fixes it. Did you know that the fire escape was invented by a woman?
I
Only
did
after a
not.
bunch of men built the buildings really tall. The lifeboat was invented by a woman. So I love the fact that you have worked in a space already that is in the deconstruction or the cause of the root cause, right? And now you're coming in going, okay, I'm going to create opportunity to circumvent this, or to solve this, or to help save this. I love this. So give me a little bit of insight. So you're retired, 30
Yes.
years in the legal profession.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've seen some nasty ones, because I know a couple girlfriends that have gone through really nasty divorces. I know a couple guys who have really also gone through nasty divorces. I know somebody who's been divorced 5 times also. So we know where the issue lies there. But I would love to go in a little bit more of who is Nancy? Why did you even go into law?
Well, that's a very interesting question. My first profession was I was a critical care nurse, and I wrote a textbook with some people from the University of Pennsylvania because I was practicing in Pennsylvania and lived in Pennsylvania at the time. and it was called Advanced Concepts in Clinical Nursing. And it was published by J.B. Lippincott in 1973. It was very well reviewed. It was adopted by many nursing schools in the United States. And many of the protocols and procedures that we advocated in the textbook were adopted by hospitals to get better patient outcomes. But the hospital that I was practicing in wouldn't even listen to the suggestions that I was making about developing some protocols, because I worked in the emergency room and intensive care, for better patient outcomes, because I was told that I was a nurse and only the protocols that were adopted by the hospital were adopted by doctors. So one day I approached a woman who was a new hire by the hospital in the cafeteria, and she had been a nurse, but she went to law school. So she was brought into the hospital because we did have a lot of problems. In any event, she was there to be like someone examining the different areas of the hospital, maternity, ICU, emergency room, where a lot of the mistakes were being made, frankly. And so I said, well, I have all these procedures that address these things. And I said, but no one is listening to me because I'm a nurse. And she said, go to law school. You'll have power. They'll listen to you then. So I went to law school. That's how I became a lawyer. I always intended to go back into hospital administration, but life got in the way, and I never did go back into hospital administration.
And so you were in law, you had the power, the people's ear. Was it pretty male dominated? I'm
Oh
guessing
my
it was
gosh.
because
I
yeah.
was the reason why I ended up doing domestic relations or family law was because I was the only woman in the law firm. And my first day on the job, I was hired to do defense malpractice, which I thought would be a great way to really learn, what's really at the pith of all of these negligent malpractice cases. And that's why I decided to do defense malpractice. So I could once again go back into, hospital administration. But my first day on the job, there were 75 divorce files piled on my desk. And I went to the senior partner and I said, look, I was hired to do defense malpractice. And he leaned across the desk and he put his finger an inch from my nose and said, you're not going to make it here. You do what we tell you to do. You're a woman, and divorces are women's work.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And it's funny because not funny, but it's because of women like you that pushing through and owning that space and taking space within that practice, um that our 30-year-olds are not facing that same I mean, there still is that, but it's not nearly pervasive as it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So let's dive in. I'd like to dive into what you're doing today. So instead of spending all day on a cruise liner having mai tais and buffets, you have taken on undertaken um, a whole nother a whole nother business, because what you're doing now is very different, even though it's pulling from that same zone of genius, that same experience. And I want people to think about this. We're not going to disclose age, but if you've done 30 years in business in legal, think about this, folks. Nearly 90% of people who step into the mentorship and coaching space struggled to even get it off the ground or to be seen and heard. So even to be at this space where Nancy's at and be able to actually bring something to the public of value is puts her in that top 10% of people who go down this path. So I want you to know, I want you to have that credit, Nancy. You deserve that credit, just even getting like doing what you're doing, writing the book and everything. So I'm going to shut up because I'm super impressed. I'm excited to hear everything you have to say. I'm going to turn this stage over to you and I want you to walk us through what you do and what people can expect when they work with you. How's that sound?
What I do right now is, as you said, and you obviously have walked the walk, um, and it's very, very hard to get off the ground at my age. And I don't mind saying I'm 75 years old, but I'm not going to lie down until I get my message out. Which, and it's interesting that I'm scheduled in January to talk about family law, marriages, prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, because January is the Black Friday for divorce lawyers. Everybody waits until January or February to get a divorce. We get most of our clients in January and February because people wait until after the holidays to break the news to the kids. They don't want to ruin the holidays. So they wait until January to tell the kids that they're getting a divorce. But in any event, I have I have a website. I've written a number of blogs. I probably have 12 or 15 blogs on my website. You can find me at nancyperpall.com. Those blogs have really helped a lot of people. I get a tremendous amount of feedback. And as a result of that feedback, I'm in the middle of writing my second book, The Malnourished Marriage: 5 Essential Emotional Nutrients for a Healthy Relationship. And in that book, I compare, I use a metaphor of food, which everyone understands. Everyone understands a healthy diet. So I use the metaphor of food to try to help people who are in difficult situations, whether they're married or it's just a partnership or a relationship. And they really feel as if it's stagnant and you feel dehydrated. I compare water to communication. You can live 3 days without water, and you cannot have a relationship without communication. The relationship dies. Everyone knows that. In any event, I go through the different stages of, protein is sex, protein is a building block, sex is the building block. So I go through that. And I actually have a mini book on my blog if anyone's really interested. And if you're in a difficult situation in your marriage or partnership, I give suggestions about how to open up communication. Instead of saying the same thing over and over again, I'm tired of this, you know, S.
Yep.
I'm tired of this. I can't handle it. If you go in and say, you know what, I feel as if our relationship is dehydrated, then that opens up a different way of explaining how you feel. You feel dehydrated. You feel as if you're missing something. And what you're missing is communication. So if anyone's interested, it's helped a lot of people. And that's the reason why I'm writing the second book.
Well,
The first book is
I love
actually
it.
a novel, and I decided to write it as a novel because I found when I was practicing law, I spent a lot of money buying pamphlets from the American Bar Association about how to tell children about a divorce, how to mediate instead of litigate, how to do this, how to do that, your post-divorce issues. No one ever read it. I mean, so I decided that if you write a novel, and they identify with the protagonist in the novel and the characters in the novel, they can really absorb more of the information than if you do, of something very dry. And it has a
Yeah.
lot of humor. Of course, if it's a novel and you want to sell it today in the United States or all over the world, it's available. You have to have a little sex. So I decided that I was going to write a novel, and it's not too much, but it's interesting. It's getting very good reviews, frankly, to my shock, because I just expected it to just sort of be ho-hum, but it's really getting good
Yep.
reviews on Amazon. It's available on Amazon. The name of it is Around Which All Things Bend. And what is it that around which all things bend? What is the one thing that everyone is looking for? Love.
Love. Yeah. So let's
And that's
let's
what the book is about. And
so
so
your program is geared more toward it's geared towards prevention of
that's right.
divorce.
That's what
Okay.
I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tell people, look, I mean, unless you're really being, as you said, excuse me, in the beginning, if there's domestic violence, infidelity, your children are being injured in some manner or fashion, emotionally or otherwise, I mean, try to work it out, because it's better to be with the devil that you know than the devil you don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I've represented people in their first divorce, their second divorce, their third divorce.
Yeah.
After that, if they haven't figured out that
Yeah.
it's them, that they
That's
need
them.
therapy,
Yeah.
you know,
If you are going through relationship after relationship after relationship, and you sit there and you keep saying nobody's listening. So I've heard this. This is what I've heard. I've had conversations with people, and they'll say, "I just don't understand why nobody can get the time right. Nobody can do this. Nobody ever hears what I'm saying." Well, if everybody is showing up at the wrong time, and if everybody is showing up with the wrong product, and if everybody is not uh, giving the conversation that you thought you were having, it's not everybody, it's you. It is you. And this is okay, folks. I have been in years of therapy. I come from a crappy childhood. And it's why do we expect ourselves individually to be something that isn't attainable? The Instagram super feed is not attainable. It is not real, it is not human, it is not humane. So set your hard limits. This is what we're talking about. Know what your hard limits are. I know for me, based on my childhood, my personal experiences, the things that I could not come back from is abuse for my person, abuse for my children, or cheating, which is another form of abuse. Anything else, because I've lived in a car, I, I have couch surfed with a toddler. I have been absolutely impoverished before. I know poverty. I know how to get out of it. That wouldn't be an issue. Um, so that's a big one. I want to walk through, if you're open to it. I know we want to get the book, but can we go through those the five cornerstones for to reinvigorate or feed a marriage? The communication, sex. What are those 5 points?
it's communication is like water, sex is like the protein, humor is the carbohydrate, right? And patience and compromise are the healthy fatty, the healthy fats. Okay, because healthy fats are what sort of protects, the organs in the body, and that's what protects the organs in the body. And then, really, forgiveness is the multivitamin. And there's a lot of dispute about multivitamins, but if you're not getting what you need from the food that you're eating, you need a multivitamin. And I'll tell you something, forgiveness goes a long way in a marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Forgiveness and compromise are the two that I see really lacking, and I think this is actually a human condition right now, not just a marriage condition. Um, when we're talking that, okay, I've got to pick your brain. Most ridiculous reason to get divorced that you've seen in your 30 years of practice. I am sure that you've seen some doozies, but what was the most ridiculous reason?
The dryer vent.
Okay,
Not cleaning the lint out of the dryer. The dryer,
seriously,
that
that was the
thing that
straw
you
that
pull
broke the
up.
camel's back.
Pardon?
That was the straw that broke the camel's back,
That was
right?
the straw that broke the camel's back.
Ridiculous.
The
And
dryer.
and
Uh-huh.
I am going to be in full transparency, folks. I love to cook. I am not a keen cleaner. Just saying, not my thing. But hiring a weekly house cleaning service is a whole lot cheaper and less stressful than getting divorced. So, yeah, the dryer vent.
Mhm.
Oh my god! But the
That
spin
was
cycle
just
on
the
the washer was
culmination
okay.
of
Yeah.
many, many other issues they had, the thermostat, but it was really the dryer vent. she didn't clean out the dryer vent, and he just got to the point where he just
So at the end, so the truth of that is he wanted out and he just found stupid
he
reasons.
he was very, tolerant on many levels, but there were things that he had asked her apparently over and over again,
Yeah.
and, it wasn't a good relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Again,
wasn't an ideal relationship, but they had kids. He didn't wanna
yep.
walk, he was
Oh, yeah.
from a fractured family, he didn't wanna do that to his children, so he put up with it as long as he could, but one day he just exploded.
He's
And
just
then,
done.
he was so out of control, he realized that that was worse for the kids than if they separated, so
Okay, so I know you're not a psychologist. However, you have played one many times, I'm guessing, in your years of practice. I am curious. I hear a lot of, we see a lot of stuff on social media, a lot of Facebook posts around the term gaslighting.
oh,
And I, I personally, I try not to get on any of these bandwagons. But seriously, is everybody being gaslighted, or is this just the word today to that people are trying to explain? Like, can you give me some and that's obviously communication, right? That's that
mhm.
core communication. Um, and I know I'm gonna have women just hating on me for this, but I don't believe that every woman that says she's being gaslighted is being gaslighted. Um, what is the true definition of that communication breakdown or that narcissistic influence of communication called gaslighting? And I'm just curious because you're the pro.
Well, I think because we evolved as the nurturers, we evolved as the fixers. As you said, women invented the lifeboat. I didn't know that. But every woman is in her own way trying to make a lifeboat so that her family, her nest stays together. And she puts herself in a situation many times, and it more often than not happens. Women are gaslighted far more than men, although men are gaslighted as well. I mean, the guy that I was talking about a minute ago, my client, had been gaslighted. But in any event, it's when you see something and you know it to be reality, but the person that is closest to you, the person that you love, the person you've given your heart to and trust not to break it, that person is telling you that what you're seeing is really not reality. They're trying to convince you to stay in the relationship by making you believe that you're misunderstanding a situation when in actual fact you're not. But you're more inclined to believe it because you fear the change, you fear losing the relationship. And that's how women get gaslighted. They get gaslighted because they're so vulnerable to you know having a relationship, and they're afraid of breaking out of that relationship. They're afraid of saying no, 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 no. The sky is blue and the moon is not made out of green cheese. And sometimes, I mean, it's not only narcissists who gaslight. I mean, you know, what's happened in American marriages, and actually, there's a ripple effect throughout the world. Traditionally, women were expected to be the homemakers. They were expected not to work. They were expected to be the mothers. They were expected to be able to have children. Men were the ones who were going to bring home the bacon, so to speak. In any event, and that has, years ago, I got married. You said you got married for the first time, I think, at 18. I got married
Yep.
at 19. My ex-husband was going to Vietnam. I was a good Catholic girl, a virgin. There's no way I'm having sex unless we're married. Well, I told my daughter, have sex before you get married. That was my big mistake, listening to the nuns. In any event, what I'm trying to say is that if you were proposed to by somebody who could afford to provide you with a two-story center hall colonial in 1965 or 66, That was a good catch. It was more of an economic. It was more, is this a good socioeconomic deal? It wasn't a romantic thing, which is now what it's got to be romantic. You've got to love the person. And, traditionally, men were the dominant force in the household. There was no parity, there was no co parenting.
Yeah.
Women raised the children, women cleaned up, women made the meals, women vacuumed, women were alone in the labor room. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, we talked about what questions you should ask before you get married. The hard questions you should ask are, if we have children, first of all, do you want children? Many millennials don't want kids anymore. They don't want to bring kids into this world that they see collapsing, in a planet they think is dying. So there are many young couples that are not having kids, and that's becoming a concern, with the government. How do
Oh,
we
yeah.
educate people?
Yeah. That's a whole nother topic. And the reality is I'm I'm have seen women who hit their, you know, uh 50s and 60s and had chose not to have children. And this is not women who did not have that choice, but women who chose, right? So and it's interesting to see some of them really go, "Whoa, wait a minute. Life is finite." And at the end of the day, when I'm 80, and it's interesting because we see this kind of this aha moment. Maybe I need to reconnect into my family. Maybe I need to do all this because they're seeing their parents being cared for. So it's a really interesting thing. But we can, you know what, Nancy and I can talk forever. You're gonna get like 6 conversations in this, but we're gonna bring it back to the young couple, first year marriage, setting those foundational rules. So it's like having a mission statement. Okay, if you're gonna start a business, what's your mission statement? What's your vision statement? Who are you speaking to? What are you speaking on? Right? These it's almost like you need a business plan.
Well, I'm really trying to educate people about prenuptial agreements. And once again, I'll tap into the millennials because they're far more educated. They're older. They, by and large, are more financially secure than we were 50 years ago,
Yeah.
55 years ago when I got married for the first time. So, it's they're electing to have prenuptial agreements. And even if you decide not to sign a prenuptial agreement, to go through the questions that should be asked. To One of the big problems now, and we talked a little bit about infidelity, is a deal breaker. The big issue, the new issue among divorce lawyers is financial infidelity. That's what we're calling it. When somebody comes into a marriage and failed to disclose they have $100,000 worth of debt. And the average person getting married at the age of 28, if they have college loans or professional school loans like doctors or lawyers, they're coming into the marriage with 30, 50, 70, $100,000 worth of debt. If you don't have an agreement about how that debt's going to get paid off, and you're the one who's working him through his residency or his first years of law practice or podiatry or, just, his plumbing business, which has a huge, income eventually, his electrical business.
Yeah.
If you don't discuss how you're going to pay that debt off, and you're the one with the full-time job at first, and you're paying that debt off, and then 5, 10, the average American marriage is now 7 years. So, you get married 5, 10 years later, you're getting divorced. You've paid all that in.
Yeah.
The courts aren't going to give you some sort of a bonus because you've paid off that debt. So,
Yeah.
what's your agreement about that? I mean, there's so many things today that you have to think about that we never had to think about when 1968, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a different world out there. So you need to disclose your debt. you need to disclose, do you want to have children? And if we have children, is your perception that our parenting is going to be gender, according to gender? In other words, if you're the woman, are you the one who's expected to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get the baby ready for daycare, drive the baby to daycare, pick up the baby, pump your breasts at work, deliver the milk to the daycare? I mean, how these young girls do it is beyond me.
I agree. I agree on that one. Having a kid is not easy. That's for absolute certain. Speaking of not easy, you know, um, building a business, what you're doing now. So you're going from the corporate space. So being a lawyer is a corporate mindset, and moving into the entrepreneurial space with your knowledge of and expertise. What is a moment of resiliency over the last few years of building this, getting the book out, getting that confidence to you're no longer standing behind this degree or education or this practice. You now are just you. This is your brand. Can you walk me through a moment of resiliency uh in your on your path of entrepreneurship and getting this out to the world?
I think my moment of resiliency was I I did not know what I was doing. I elected not to try to traditionally publish my novel. I decided that I was going to do a hybrid type of a situation. And I thought that, they do charge you a fee, obviously. They're not in business, they're not a charity, which is understandable. But I was really too naive or didn't explore it enough and was really disappointed and very, very discouraged um, at the timing of things. Of course, everything was, blamed on COVID, and the quality of what I paid for was not what I thought it was going to be. And I was really discouraged. And, I worked very hard as a lawyer and as a nurse, by the way. I didn't really need to work. I didn't need to publish this book. I didn't do it for the money. And I really thought that I was just going to chuck it and go play golf. And I really thought, I don't need this headache. I
Yeah.
mean, here I am paying for something that's not being done and not being done to the level, frankly, that I was promised it would be done. Why am I getting brain damage hitting my head against the wall? I mean, why not just chuck it? I don't need this headache. And then I remembered why I did this.
Yeah.
And the last 10 years that I practiced law, a young man came into my office and he sat down and he said, I introduced myself. Obviously, my secretary, a receptionist would bring them back. And he said, "You don't recognize me, do you?" And I said, "I'm terribly sorry." He was a very attractive young man. He was like 28 or 30. And I said, "No, I'm sorry." And he told me his name, and it didn't really spur any memories, any neurological connections up there. So I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "You represented my mother when my father tried to sue her for custody, and you interviewed me, and I never forgot what you said." And he said, "I'm sorry to say I'm here because I'm going through the same thing that my parents went through, and I wouldn't have anybody else represent me but you." And I was like blown away by this. I thought to myself, I made such an impact on this young man. He's coming back. What? I think he was maybe 12 when I interviewed him. And, I told him at that time, and he was torn because his father said, "If you don't tell the judge that you want to live with me, I am never going to see you again. I'm never going to, I'm not going to pay for college." He was going to a private school. "You're not going to be going to that cushy school, blah, blah, blah." And he threatened the kid. So what I said to him when I interviewed him. And he was honest with me because he was afraid to tell the judge how he really felt. And many children, I can tell you, by the way, many children are threatened and bullied by parents when they think the child is going to be interviewed by a judge. But
Yep.
what I told him was that what his father was saying to him was noise. It was just noise. It wasn't really what his father would do. His father obviously loved him. He wanted him to live with him. And I said, your father's hurting. And he's trying to tell you that he needs you and he wants you to live with him. But where do you want to live? And he said, my father has never really paid attention to me. I want to live with my mother. I love my mother. And it would break her heart if I tell the judge I don't want to live with her. And he said, I feel like I feel like a hamster in a cage running and running and running. And so anyway, I did tell him that his father would get over it, that he needed to tell the judge what was in his heart, and he needed to tell the judge even if the lawyer's in the room, you need to tell the judge what both of your parents said. And that's what he did. So anyway, I
Yeah, that is the strength you draw on when you're sitting here like the rest of us trying to figure out this online world, right? Because I'm
uh,
not an Instagram influencer. So, it's a lot harder when it's not your first language. I always tell my husband technology is a language unto its own, and it's a language that I'm constantly trying to learn. So, folks, I've brought up Nancy's book here, Around Which All Things Bend, and you're in the uh, right now in the midst of the Malnourished Marriage, which I think actually is, if you intend to pop the question and get engaged, I think this is like book a weekend retreat and do the Malnourished Marriage, read it together and walk through it together, because I think that just being aware can circumvent some challenges. When is the Malnourished Marriage expected out?
probably not until the fall of 2023. I'm using a different
Awesome.
publisher, by the way.
Awesome. And that's the beauty of being realist, being in an entrepreneur, is that we get the opportunity to pivot. We have that opportunity to move and shift and change, because I mean, 3 weeks ago, a new AI came and has just taken the world by storm. And now, I mean, the entire forecast of what's going to happen in the next 18 months has shifted. The
Mhm.
dialogue has shifted. So allow yourself room, give yourself grace, and shift as things go. And we will definitely be watching for the Malnourished Marriage while we jump on the Around Which All Things Bend. And that's a little love. I think the Beatles talked about that. So, again, can you share with us where we can find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Nancy Perpall author. I'm on Instagram, Nancy Perpall author, and that's spelled Perpall. And I'm on my website, which I highly recommend the blogs to if somebody's struggling. There's a blog about prenuptial agreements. There's a blog about after you have your first child. There's a blog about a new issue that's really coming to the fore, which is that men also suffer postpartum depression clinically. They, in terms of their blood work and otherwise, they have the same symptoms as women, and that's not well recognized.
Yeah.
And a lot of new parents with their first child really go through a very bumpy road, very bumpy. And
Yeah.
they need to
Children
be
and
aware of that.
children and finance are two of the key corruptors of marriage. It's why people get divorced. Children and
Mhm.
finance. Isn't that
Yep.
crazy, eh? Um, so everybody take a look at Nancy and listen to what she's saying, because she's bringing a wealth of knowledge. And I love the fact that it's a preventative measure. We're really starting to lean into this over the last decade, talking about preventative health measures and preventative mental health measures and preventative automotive care and preventative everything, right? So if you want something to last, that's simple. You got to put work in. Nothing good comes easy. Nothing good comes easy. And marriage is not easy. Let me tell you, marriage is not easy. But it's pretty rewarding when you got somebody at your back when you get up in the morning or you don't feel 100% or you can't show up 100%. So give 100% to start with. Know where you're at, where you stand, and connect. I am so grateful, Nancy, honestly, that you chose not to hit the golf course.
I think the other golfers are glad that I'm not a golfer.
I'm with you. I can drive the cart, but it's a six one way, half a dozen the other of whether or not I'll actually hit a ball. So, give us a quote. Close us out with a quote today.
Um, I I think the quote that always sticks in my mind is there are two tragedies in life. You've probably heard this one. One is to never have the thing you desire, and the other is to have it. And I think that when you think about it, you long for something and long for something, and you think, if I have that, I'm going to be happy. If I have that, I'm going to be happy. If I had a boyfriend, I'll be happy. If I had a husband, I'd be happy. If I had a child, I'd be happy. And then when you get it, it really doesn't mean that you're going to be happy. The happiness comes from yourself.
Within.
And
Yeah.
I think the thing that really helps people be resilient is that there are two things you can decide in life. Actually, you can decide when something bad happens to you to be bitter, or you can decide to be better. And I think that's really, in a nutshell, what resilience is. It's a mindset. And people hate that term anymore, mindset, because it's
You know
overused.
what, though? It's absolutely true. Everybody gets a challenge. Everybody has a challenge. Everybody makes a choice, and everybody gets a consequence. What do you want your consequence to be? That is that's awesome, Nancy. That is awesome. I have thoroughly enjoyed. I could sit here and talk another hour with you. I think you're absolutely amazing, and I'll be making sure that that my children are preemptive and read the Malnourished Marriage. To ensure that they can have long, healthy, happy marriages or partnerships or whatever form that takes. Because it sure is nice to have somebody that's secured for your every Friday night happy hour.
Well, the novel also talks about things that are preventive, just in a different way, not as straightforward. It's more entertaining and humorous.
Awesome. Well, we'll go grab that. Until next time, Nancy, thank you for joining us here at Kim
Thank you for
Talks
having me.
Resilience. Oh, this is just amazing. You know what, folks? Start your year out right. Put all those things in line. Know how you can connect. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to those around you. And if you ever feel that your resiliency is lagging, you know what? Listen and lean in to our resilient community here at Kim Talks Resilience, where we have our monthly or bi-monthly magazine. We have all the podcasts. We have a workshop and conference coming up soon. But you know what? Go and get your free access at resilientgift.com. And until next time, you know what? Give yourself some grace. Thank you for joining us here today at Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden, and I'd love to invite you to our resilient community at resilientgift.com. That's resilientgift.com, and we'll send you our magazine and tickets for upcoming events and all sorts of cool things we do here. So be sure to keep watching, and you know what? Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, because we all know that sharing is caring.